Okay, you all probably know Christina that works here at the library.
Oh, okay.
Her and her husband Christopher are the ones that wrote the book, and we're wanting to see about hauntings. And everybody seems to be very excited about that, and hope you enjoy the program.
I'm going to try and talk loud. Usually I'm pretty loud and I project really well, but if for any reason I get really quiet or I'm not talking, you know, just make the symbol, let me know I need to speak up and I'll do my best.
Or get closer to the mic.
Yeah. I don't want to scream into the microphone. So I'm Christy Hunt, and this is my husband, Christopher. And I had to switch this over, and I'm going to tell you just a little bit about us. So we have been researching paranormal history of Crawfordsville for over 10 years. We started the Crawfordsville Paranormal Society. We went on a couple of investigations. We never found any proof of anything. I can be honest and upfront about that. I would have loved to have said, oh, we had something really great. We did not. However, when we were doing this, we realized that what we really loved about all this stuff was researching it. The researching the history and all of that, that's what we really liked. And so that's kind of the direction we started taking.
Yeah, we were just obsessed with all the history of Montgomery County and Crawfordsville and all the interesting things that newspapers had to say about those time periods from the time this town was founded up till now.
Anything else you want to add? So, what's that?
This is your show, right?
Our journey into writing this book is a little bit different than most people's journeys into writing books. A lot of people sit down and say, I'm going to write a book. We sat down 10, 11 years ago and said, how cool would it be to write a book? And then we never did anything. We just continued to collect stories, collect history, and compile a big file of things that we loved. And meanwhile, we had this website for Crawfordsville Paranormal Society. We didn't really do a whole lot with it because we were just immersed in researching. I think that all of you here in the Genealogy Club probably understand how, you know, it just takes over. It's addicting, researching. And about a year and a half ago, a guy reached out to us through our website and said, hey, I am with Arcadia Publishing. We would love for you to write a book. And we looked at each other and we said, well, that's a scam. We don't believe that. And then I was thinking about it and I thought, you know what? I know people who have published with Arcadia. Let's reach out to them and see what they say. So we contacted Karen Zock. I'm sure a lot of you guys know who that is. And we said, does Arcadia Publishing do that? And she goes, yeah, they do that. So we messaged him back. We said, yeah, we'd be interested in writing this book. We talked back and forth a little bit. And we came to an agreement on what we would do. He said, I will give you a year to write this book. And we said, great. So we already have a lot of research. We're going to write this book. He contacted us about 2 weeks later and said, how about 4 months? Can you get it done in 4 months? And we said, we'll give it our best shot. And so we hope that those of you who have read it or who haven't read it, that you don't think that it was rushed in 4 months, because we did put our heart and soul in trying to make sure it was as good as possible, but that it was 4 months.
It is a nightmare trying to get pictures. You literally have 4 months to try to get pictures from 200 years of history.
So at Arcadia Publishing, if you guys don't know, they're into local history, and I will tell you, they are completely open to people contacting them and saying, I want to write a book about this, especially in this area. They do not have a lot in central Indiana, and that is the stuff that they're looking for right now. If you don't know about Arcadia Publishing, they have a lot of little subgenres that they print in. We print in the Haunted America series, but they also have Images of America, Arcadia Kids. They have a True Crime, a Natural History, Civil War series. They have a lot. If you go onto their website, you'll see there's a whole long page of different things that they write in, that if you're interested in that, that's where you can contact them and say, this is what I'm interested in writing about. Would you like to help me publish this book?
And if you need examples for the things they write in, Karen's written several books with them, and they're upstairs for you to check out.
Arcadia is not the only way to publish books, and they are our publisher. We do like them, we do enjoy working with them. However, we have met other Arcadia publishers as well, who are Arcadia authors, I apologize. Arcadia authors as well, who also publish in other ways. So sometimes, you know, you can only get so much done with Arcadia, but you have other ideas of things you want to do.
Because they will limit you. So if you've written something similar, they will, in a generalized area, they won't let you write about the same thing in the same area. Like we potentially want to write another book about this area, we can't in the haunted series because it overlaps. So you have to find other ways to print books.
So two ways that we are aware of are Amazon KDR and Ingram Spark, and he's going to tell you about those because I haven't looked into that.
One of the best ways is Ingram, because Ingram is available at all libraries and all bookstores. So once you put your book in there, and it's free to do it, it doesn't cost you any money to upload your book to their website. The only thing that costs you any money is to buy your ISBN. ISBN, sorry. And so otherwise you have no cost involved until you print books yourself. And you don't have to print any books yourself if you don't want to. You can actually just have them put it in Amazon's website, Barnes & Noble's, all those things through Ingram. And you can also go out to local bookstores and say, hey, would you like to pick up my book? It's available on Ingram. So Ingram Spark is the specific part of that company that deals with self-publishing, and they're probably the most dominant right now outside of Amazon for self-publishing books, because it is free to do it. Amazon is the second one, and if you want to do an ebook of any type, Amazon is the way to go. Ingram will do ebooks, but Amazon is a much larger retailer for ebooks. And when you do an ebook of any type, you are kind of locked in with the company you do it with. Like, for instance, if you do with KDR, you can't do an ebook with someone else. But you can do a published material with more than one publisher. And in a lot of cases, it's smarter to do so because the prices for the books are better. So like Ingram is a great place to put your novel, to then be able to get it available to a bookstore or to a library. But if you also go to Amazon KDR, your prices for buying books yourself to then resell is a lot better for you, and your royalties is going to be a lot higher because of it. Anywhere from, like for a natural public, we get 8%. You can get up to 70% with Amazon KDR.
For royalties.
For your royalties from your
But
book.
we will say, you do not publish local history and genealogy and books and stuff like that to make money. You do it because it's a passion project. So don't think, oh, I'm going to get rich on this. You do it because you love it and it makes you happy and you want other people to read this stuff and have that history.
And it's a lot of work on you. So anytime you put out one of these books, even with Arcadia or any of the publishers that are similar to them that are going to do history books, they're going to publish your book. They'll put it in Amazon, they'll put it in Barnes & Noble's, and they'll put it in the local area bookstores if they can. But that's all they're going to do for you. They're not going to set up author events. They're not going to set up any kind of other ways to sell your book. It's all on you.
So we would hope that other people who do this stuff, or if you decide that you want to do it, you are also as passionate as we are. Put yourself out there and make people hear your story. Like we're doing tonight, we're forcing you to hear this story because we love the haunted history of Montgomery County. The one thing that we do want to point out, and we put it down here at the bottom, is if you're going to self-publish in a different way, make sure you buy your ISBN yourself. Don't let whoever you publish it buy the ISBN. That way you own your book and you can do what you want with it.
Yeah, because they'll give you a free one if you publish with them, but you don't own your manuscript once it goes to that point. And if you option your book to a publisher Like Arcadia Publishing, you don't own your book until it's out of print. And like for us, our book has to be out of print for 4 years before the rights revert to us. Which means I don't own my book. I can't go out and make T-shirts with my book on it and sell them. I can't make mugs with my book on them without permission from the publisher themselves. I got a banner for our book, and that was extremely difficult. I had to have all kinds of permissions just to have that to put it in a booth for us to be able to sell the book. So there's a lot of little things like that in the contracts you have to watch for when you do publish books.
So, and then that is the second thing is watch your contract. Read your contract, read the fine print, know what you're getting yourself into and what you can and can't do. Because you do want to share everything with everybody. You want to make sure you can.
And make sure you know where you can sell your books. Like, for instance, I can print the books and I can get the books sent to me, and then I can sell you a book, but I can't take those books and go to a small bookstore and sell those books to the bookstore. That's against the rules. That's a violation of my contract. I have to go to that bookstore, try to promote myself, and then convince them to contact my publisher or Ingram, because our books are in Ingram, to buy the book that way. So there are little loopholes there you have to watch for, that you don't want to get yourself in trouble with your contract and lose out. Because if you violate the contract, you violate ever getting rights to your book back. That's in the contract.
Okay. So creating a book is more than just doing the researching and writing, which is the fun part for me. I'm probably, again, preaching to the choir about that. But you also have editing and proofreading again and again and again and again. You're gonna reread your own book, your own writing 5 or 6 times. Someone else is gonna read it 5 or 6 times. Someone else is gonna say, hey, you made a mistake here. You're gonna look at it and say, no, I didn't. And they're gonna say, yes, you did. And you're gonna fight back and forth on it until you come to an agreement. Just know, love your work, because you're reading it at least a half a dozen times before it even goes into printing. The next thing is formatting pages. That I let him do that because I am not good at formatting things or computers very well. But if you do not know how to format a page correctly to what the publisher wants, you're going to have to learn how to do that. And they don't do it for you. You have to do it and send it to them correctly.
And every publisher will format differently. What the type of the words have to be, the length of the words, the page, the width of the margins, and the spacing of those sentences and the words it gets to be tedious to go through and redo it when you're sending it to multiple places. So it's definitely something and there are programs that can help you with it that are out there. I didn't buy any myself because I could do it, but there are programs out there. And then of course there are people who will edit your book and do the format for you for a reasonable cost if you want to go that route as well.
And there's formatting and the digitizations of pictures and the licensing to make sure you are allowed to use the pictures. If you can at all, take your own pictures. So that you have license to use those pictures. Otherwise, you have to contact whoever owns the picture, make sure you have permission to use the picture. Some pictures, when they're over 100 years old, they're open to the public. You don't have to get permission to use it, but other pictures that belong to a library collection, you do have to have permission to use those. We were very lucky with some of our pictures. Deli digitized and formatted the pictures for us so that we were able to use them. But you need to make sure you have the correct resolutions in your pictures or they can't accept them. With the cover art, you don't always have say on what your cover art is going to look like. Sometimes you can have a little bit of input, but mostly the publishers are going to make that decision over what the cover art looks like. To give you a little bit of an example of these last two things, this is a picture that we were able to use in the book. Lucinda Brooks and her sister allowed us to use this family photo of hers. It was taken at the Ghost Photography Studio downtown, located in the parking lot of what is now the courthouse. You can see that there are some images of people in the photos. She told us, Ms. Brooks told us that they did recognize the faces, that these were not unknown faces that showed up in the pictures. because she brought the pictures in, allowed Deli to scan them for the library, and then allowed us to use them, we were able to use those photos. This picture over here is of the old hospital. We really loved this picture, and we wanted to put it on the front of our cover. We ended up using the old jail museum because even though this picture, I think, looks a little better quality than this picture, does not have the right resolution for the publisher to use it. And they were unable to use it for the cover art.
And your resolution between your cover and your internal pages is drastically different. So even though a picture might be okay to put on the side of the book, it doesn't mean it'll be okay to put on your cover.
And then as far as the cover goes, we took this picture. This was the picture that we took, and then that is the edited version of what the publisher did to it to make it different.
Okay, can we go back to the other picture?
Yeah.
That past one?
Yeah.
And, okay, the image right there behind the guy's head, this was allegedly a ghost then?
Yes.
Yes, so it's a story that you'll read in the book.
There was a gentleman by the name of Abner Willis who had a spirit photography studio in Crawfordsville. It was one of the very first ones of its kind across the world. It wasn't the first one, obviously, because there are ones that are even more famous. But he's the only person in the
He's
history
one
of
of
this
the
country. No, he's the only one in the history of our country that's never been disproven as a fake, with someone trying to disprove it.
So what's interesting about that is a friend of his, because he so believed in him, his name is Fisher Doherty, he believed in Abner Willis and what he was doing. He put an ad in the Indianapolis Star for $1,000, which, as we know,
1856.
that's a lot of money at that time, and said, anybody who wants to come to Crawfordsville and prove that Abner is faking these photos, I will give you $1,000. At that time, it was also, I apologize, a crime to fake these photos. People were going to jail over defrauding people.
Wow.
And so people came from all over to test Abner Willis. They used his camera, and Abner didn't touch it, and the ghost showed up. They used their cameras in the studio, and as long as Abner was in the room, the ghost showed up. They took the cameras completely apart, put them back together. Nobody could figure out how these images were appearing in the photos. And unlike some other ghost photos that came at that time, they would be random. Just random ghosts would appear in the photos. The photos that Abner was taking, people knew the people in the photos. They were from here, they were from Crawfordsville. People knew who these people were.
Now, do you guys know anything about the old way of taking photos back in the day? The tent type photos? They're really easy to fake. They would take the photo and then wash it through a special chemical and then retake the next photo, and then those photos would come through. The images would, so it was really easy to fake at Ghost Photography Studio at that time. And so it should have been easy to debunk him if he was faking it, and they just never could.
And then additionally, Abner was scared to death of this stuff happening. He thought that a demon had possessed his studio, and he tore it apart and swore he was never going to take another photo. And his friend Fisher, who believed himself to be a medium, said, no, Abner, you're a medium like me, and you need to do this. You have a gift, and you need to give it to people, and convinced him to restart doing these things. So.
Are you saying that the medium was a necessary component of the ghost image appearing?
He had to be in the room. If he wasn't in the room, it didn't happen. But as long as he was in the room, it happened. So whether he took the photo or someone else took the photo, as long as he was in the room, they showed up.
But he didn't consider himself a medium.
He did not.
No.
No. And it scared him. He was terrified of it.
And then afterwards, they did do a lot of showings of his photos throughout the ages, all the way up to Chicago. His son took his photos to Chicago and put them in a museum up there to show off the photos because people enjoyed them so much at that time. Because it was a giant movement across the country, the whole spiritualism and ghosts and things like that.
So at this time, we only know of 3 existing remaining Abner Willis ghost photos.
Actually, I now know a 4th.
Do we know a 4th
I
one?
found a 4th.
Okay, well, we have a 4th one. 3 of them are in the book, and the library has copies of 2 of them.
I just recently found the 4th one. it's been painstaking. I've been looking for these photos for 10 years, trying to find
Where'd you
them.
find it?
I found it, the newest one is in Texas. So I'm trying to see if I can get a station of them. These ones, the lady lives in Frankfurt. We have two of them. They're sisters, and they actually founded the spiritualism movement in Indianapolis.
Their family did.
Their family did, and then the third one I found, I got that one from California.
When you say you found the photos, do you mean the original or a copy?
Online, I found where they had posted online at some point showing that the photo, and then there's a lot of these photos out there.
But we have handled the originals.
Yeah, for these.
Yes.
So then I have to go back and I have to find out who was the one who took the photos, when were they taken, what photography studio were they taken at? Because Willis did have a photography studio in a different state at one time, not just Indiana. So that's a whole part of the thing, is trying to figure out when they were taken, where they were taken, those kind of things. So it's a painstaking process, but it's been rewarding.
I believe, I'm not 100% positive, but I believe the two photos that we have upstairs, Deli scanned both the front and the back, and on the back, the family has written who the ghosts are.
I guess.
So they have those things.
The original, I meant to say, did you see the negatives? Are they negative?
There's no negatives with these.
A print from the negative.
Yeah, there's no negatives with these kind of photos. They're tintype photos. They're just hard metal photos, or they're real hard paper. That's what they printed on, and they didn't print negatives and things like that with this technology back then.
So did he have like the old photos, they had the name? Did he have his name on the?
Yes.
Yes.
Bottom? So,
Yes.
okay.
Now, these ones don't have it, because she has taken them out of that. What they would do is they put them in a card that had his name stuff. These two don't have that. The one I just found recently still has it. And the lady who has the third one, she has removed it off of that one as well, but she still has the copy of it. I've only found one that's still in that's the newest one I just found.
So when we agreed and made our contract with Arcadia about how we were going to write this book, we had to sit down and decide how are we actually going to do this. Yes, we had 10 years of research that we had been doing, but we needed to decide the path we were going to take to get this written in 4 months. So the first thing we did is ask our friends and family that we knew to share the stories and legends that they knew of Crawfordsville. And then we wrote all those down, and then we went and researched them. Everybody talked about the Crawfordsville monster. We did extensive research on that.
Is everyone familiar with the Crawfordsville monster? Okay, so in 1891, Reverend G.W. Switzer walked out of his church.
The Baptist church right over here?
It's not the Baptist church, it's the Methodist church.
It was the Methodist church. I apologize.
He walked out of the Methodist
I thought it
church
was First
directly
Baptist.
across from the lake place.
Yes.
And he walked out of there and to the well to get a drink of water, and looked above him and saw a flying creature. They described it to be 8 feet wide, 20 feet long, billowing with what looked like fins for instead of wings, or instead of just covered in fins. It had a red eye that gave off heat, and it made mechanical, like, whining noises.
And people felt nauseous when it came near.
So when he sees it, he calls his wife out, and they watch it, and it goes to the lane house and flutters over the field for a little bit, hovering in the air, and then it proceeds to go down towards Green Street, and to a gentleman, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but it's his shop where they would hitch up the wagon to go get the ice. And so the two gentlemen that were there doing that, they saw it, and they were so scared, they hid in the barn until it went away. And it was there for over an hour in the sky, in between here. And so then it left. This was about between 2 and 3 in the morning. And then the next day it came back. And at this point, a lot of people knew that this had happened, because Reverend Switzer was famous for lots of things. He is actually the one, if you've ever heard of the ghost of
Shawnee Mounds
ghost.
ghost.
He is the one who discovered the crime, and that the pastor had murdered his wife. And so he was famous, so he talked about it. The next night, it came back at the same exact time, and over 100 people in the area watched it. And then they were re-interviewed in 1910 by a gentleman from the Fortean Society, Vincent Gaddis. And those interviews that still exist, they're in New York in a museum today. We're attempting to get copies of them.
We contacted the museum. They said they do have all of Vincent Gaddis's research and things in a box, but they would not copy them and send them to us. However, we are welcome to come up there and look at them, and we just have not been able to make that trip yet. But that's on the list. That's a bucket list item. We want to go get copies of those interviews so that we can bring them back here and put them in our collection.
So the Crawfordsville monster, when you're a kid, a lot of times in this area, a lot of people talk about it. At least in our families, they talked about it. So that really sparked us to want to research things even more. And so that was obviously a big thing that happened in Crawfordsville in that time period. So we wanted to make sure that went in the book, and we did everything we could to get all the research for it possible.
So the third thing we did, if you'll look up here, and I'm going to tell you and stress to you, this is the most important thing that we did in researching this book, and it's pestering Dell. She's put up with a lot of us, and so Deli's been very kind to us, and as she knew what we were researching, what we were looking at, anytime she would come across something interesting, she'd point us in the right direction. And I felt like she held her hand the whole way through this. So
yes, we definitely could have found several of these stories without her.
I can't stress Pastor Nelly enough.
Because we tried to make sure that everything we put in our book is either an urban legend that is from Crawfordsville, or it is grounded in the history of Crawfordsville with some kind of newspaper article about it. So almost every little thing in the book, I have a newspaper article from that time period that talks about it. And
or we have at least 5 or 6 people who heard this legend growing up, heard this tale passed, from their parents and their grandparents. So we wanted the book to be the history of these legends of Crawfordsville, because we believe that that is our inheritance. It's what we pass on to the future, is the stories and legends of your town.
So I got a quick learner's course on reading flat maps, thanks to Deli, trying to figure out where these things were. Because a lot of times back then they would say it happened in Crawfordsville, but it didn't. It would happen 3 or 4 miles north of Crawfordsville, but it was all considered the area, so the newspapers didn't differentiate. Like the Shawnee Mountain Ghost, trying to figure out exactly where that took place, I'm still struggling with. Because they talk about it that it's in Tippecanoe County, Fountain County, Montgomery County. And the little area there is no longer there. The church hasn't existed in over 100 years. So I can't just go and find the place. So I've been trying to go through all the flat maps and try to figure out exactly where it was. And a lot of the stuff was never recorded. So it's just, it's a difficult process, but it's a lot of fun.
One of the fun things with that research, even though that is not in the Shawnee Mountain Ghost, is not in this book, it is something we're looking at for a future book, is we found several articles that talk about it. And if you've been in any of these old newspapers, you will notice they are like gossip rags. And I am here for it. I will sit there and I will read those. What was John Smith doing in Wingate? I'd like to know too.
Which is really hard, because Mace, we had several really good stories in Mace that we could never pinpoint where the actual place was, because it was just a gossip rag and not telling us the details.
Or they were using, familiar, like they called it this hill, but that's not on any map. That's just what the locals called it. They called it, that particular place. But the Shawnee Mountain Ghost, we found a couple of newspaper articles that would say, so-and-so was returning from Shawnee Mounds and passed by Wingate, and we're like, okay, it's around Wingate, and then we'll find another thing, and then pass by this street, and we're like, okay, we're narrowing this down, we're trying to triangulate,
and then something
where did this
all the way
happen?
It's so frustrating.
So we also spent a lot of time reading other local history books. We wanted to know how other people were writing things, the things that they considered important, because they paved the way for us. So they've already done it. They already know what they're doing. So we need to know, what can we leave out? What do we not add into this? How do we go about it? And then, of course, I think that you guys are all going to be well aware of this, but you're about to see how my brain works. Keyword searches in different databases. Sometimes you just sit down and you got to pick a word, like if you're researching a family, and put down hunt in the database and see what comes up and look at everything. Because you never know what you're going to miss. So, use all the tools at your disposal, Does everybody know these different tools? Hoosier Chronicles?
Oh, yeah.
Find a Grave, our very own local history database. This is Karen Zock's site, the engine. Archives.com, newspapers.com, different church archives. We have an archivist for the Mace Church here on staff, and I also did a lot of pestering of her when I was researching things in Mace, because she has those family histories and things, that she's building all of that, and so I could track people down just through talking to the different churches. And then, of course, talking to the people around you. And I don't just mean local history people. If you're researching for your family, talk to your family, you know? Don't just say, I'm doing this. Even if you haven't talked to Cousin Ed in 15 years, call Cousin Ed and see what he has to say. Even if he goes on for 2.5 hours about his knee, he might drop a little tidbit of something that you need to have. So,
and watch it too, because some of these websites, like, they'll have newspapers, but they won't have the exact same dates. And some of them, like, there's like Google Newspaper Archive. If you go there and do some research, you'll find newspapers there that we don't have here on Hoosier State Chronicles, which is a huge fountain of information. But there's a lot of times that that'll have stuff this won't have, like the Argus is on there, but it's not on here. And that's a very good newspaper to go through for that time period. It has a lot of information in that newspaper. And so you have to really search out the different newspaper websites and look, because different libraries have digitized them in different ways, even to the point that they might have Monday but not have Tuesday, kind of thing. So you have to watch that and try to go to different websites for them.
So when I sat down to Hoosier Chronicles for the first time and I just typed the word ghost in, after selecting newspapers by Montgomery County, I just said, let's look at the Crawfordsville Weekly Journal, typed in ghost, 274 hits. Wow. Now, not all of those are ghost stories. Those newspapers put in snippets of stories so people could read a story together. And so, like, there might be a Christmas Carol, might be in 6 or 7 newspapers where they talk about ghosts. Those are all going to show up because I use the word ghosts.
And almost every Monday edition from the 1800s to early 1900s is going to have a Holy Ghost in it.
As I say, you see the second one, it says Holy Ghost next to it.
Yeah, almost every time. You can almost ignore those papers because that day, because every one of them is going to have Holy Ghost in it.
Kind of like a soap opera.
Yes. Okay. I think this next slide is a look into my brain.
Yes.
And then I'm going to tell you this story about Madam Crow in my researching in Madam Crow. Karen Zock contacted us and told us that she had found a small article that mentioned a fortune teller in Crawfordsville named Madam Crow.
And real quick, when you do this, Madam Crow is a fortune teller. So you have to think about that the names and the way things are named then compared to now is different. So you can't look up fortune teller, you have to look up Madam, even though Madam completely now would be something totally different. And you find that a lot with this stuff when you're doing research, that the titles and things that they talk about is completely foreign to what you think it is now.
So we found this Consulted with Madam Crow article. I'm going to read just a little bit of this because I was very excited about this. So Vory Brookshire had the future revealed to him before the election. A special to the Indianapolis News from Washington gives the following concerning Mr. Brookshire, which is calculated to inspire the belief that he once consulted Madam Crow. I am not superstitious, said Congressman Brookshire, but there is an old character living in the town of Crawfordsville, Indiana, whom we call Aunt Jane. 3 months before the election, she told me that I would be defeated, although she has been a lifelong friend of mine and was anxious to see me elected. She has strangely prophetic vision and is consulted frequently by persons anxious to locate articles which have been lost or stolen. So he did lose that election. He went to Congress and told them about our Madam Crow and that she said, you weren't going to win, and I didn't win. But that's how impressed he was with her. We also found lots of articles about how Madam Crow is a fraud, and she's a fake. And she accidentally one time almost got a man hung. And there's a whole drama saga, soap opera, newspaper articles. You can go in there and research her about that story where she almost got a man hung over this. wrong prediction that he had murdered a child, which came up missing just as they were about to hang him up in the street. Like he showed up, he spent the night at someone else's house. That's what happened to him, but she told everybody, oh, he murdered that kid. We wanted to know more about Madame Crow. However, we had Madame Crow, we had Aunt Jane. We don't know who Madame Crow is. So I kept searching Crow, and sometimes you'll see it C-R-O-W-E, sometimes you'll see it C-R-O-W. It's never the same, and that's when you're researching and doing your own genealogy. I think you guys will come across that a lot. They're not always spelled the same, and that's very frustrating. At one point, I found this article up here in the top middle that talks about Madame Crow because it talks about Ben Crow. Ben had returned to attend the funeral of his mother, Madame Crow. And I thought, okay, Ben Crow. I had already searched Madame Crow in Find a Grave. That didn't come up. I didn't know her name. But now I had Ben Crow. So I went to Find a Grave, and I searched Ben Crow. In that, I found his certificate of death, which states that his mother's name was Mary Love. And so I searched Mary Crow and got more hits. So Mary Crow down here, Mrs. Mary Crow, the noted fortune teller. There we go. Madame Crow's name is Mary, and that is Mary Love Crow. I went on to be able to find her obituary. It didn't say a birth date in it, but it does have the day that she died, which is the 8th of December, which was a Saturday, and it says she died on that Saturday. So I knew it was either the 8th of December or the 1st of December. It says she's 74, so I was able to backtrack and figure out when her birthday is, and then go on to Find a Grave, put Mary, born in 1820, died in 1984. This should be 1884, not 1984, I apologize, in Montgomery County, but nothing came up. And this obituary says she was buried in Oak Hill Cemetery. So I know she's there. So the next step is contact Oak Hill Cemetery. I want to know where she's buried. Well, they can tell me, we know where Ben is, but he no longer has a tombstone. But I can tell you where he is. So we think, well, maybe his mother's near him. Is there anybody else by that name? They have no record of Mary Crow, Mary Love, anything like that whatsoever.
We found out a lot, actually. There were several people that we wrote about in the book that I knew for a fact that they were buried in Oak Hill Cemetery, Old Oak Hill Cemetery, as we like to call it. But there's no record at Oak Hill Cemetery that they were ever buried there.
Wow. And they did tell us that there were records that were destroyed that they did not get a hold of before they were able to preserve them. Oh. So unfortunately, we believe her records were one of them. So this is as far as we can get with Mary Crow and where she is now. Do you guys rabbit hole like this when you're doing your researching?
Just need somebody to witch for her.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting because Linden is famous for water witches back in this time. So we are looking into that. So other things you consider when you're doing your research, keep asking questions. Be both specific and vague, because people are not always sure what you want to know. So be specific and ask those specific questions because they're not sure what you want to know, but also be vague enough that they might just randomly tell you something you didn't even know you wanted to know. People might get sick and tired of you. I know we have several friends that were like, could you quit talking about this? Absolutely not. We're talking about it until you're sick of me.
Even to the point that I talk about it so much, she yells at me and tells me to shut up.
Make sure you balance your rabbit holing. He's good at that. He can say, okay, I'm done on this topic. This is as far as I've gotten. I'm not going anymore. I am like, well, I'm done with Mary Crow. Let me research all of Ben Crow, track his family line, figure out who his relatives are, who are still living in Crawfordsville. Yes, I know them, and they're related to me. I'm very excited about it.
That's a big thing when you're going to write a book. Figure out how many words your book is going to be, how big it's going to be, and limit yourself. Because, yeah, you can have all this history, but you're not going to be able to include it. So why waste the time that you figure out your book out by doing too much rabbit hole?
And as always, human memory is fallible. Even if we think we know exactly how that played out, how that happened, how that story was told to us, it might not be exactly right. So that's why it's important to keep asking other people questions, keep digging, and verify. Sometimes you need 2 or 3 things that say, this is how this went, before you can say, okay, I agree, this is the way this went. I actually think you were talking about that earlier. You said you had something that you think fits, but you're not convinced yet. Yeah, you gotta keep on. And also when you're talking to people, sometimes it takes a teeny tiny detail to spark a deep memory. Like I said, we have been researching this stuff for 10 years. My parents know that I am fascinated with this subject.
To the point we like to terrify their children.
Yes, we do. We have ghost story nights at my parents' house. I have siblings as young as 7, and we scare them. And it's wonderful. We wrote the book. We had the book out. My mom came to a talk that we did where I had been discussing Madame Crow. And afterwards, she said, your great-grandma was a fortune teller. Did you know that? No. What do you mean? And she's like, yeah, she lived right down there by Nicholson School, and people would come to her to get spiritual readings. My great-grandmother was Blackfoot Native American, and she did spiritual healings down there. Put her name into the newspaper, popped it up, articles for her all over. Come see Madam Schaefer for spiritual healing. 10 years, and she never once said anything about that. Once you know more details about something, repeat the same search as you did. I know you spent 4 months researching this topic. You thought you were done, but you learned something new. Go back to it, research more, because you don't know what's going to pop up when you add those 2 or 3 extra little things to it. So what's next for us? Right now we are researching Park and Putnam County. We're also doing Fountain County. I am working on a local history true crime because that's kind of where my secondary passion is. And we're doing another book on Montgomery County as a whole because we love Crawfordsville, but we also love Montgomery County.
And this place is crazy. I could have written 3 books that size without even hardly scratching the surface with the paranormal haunted history of Montgomery County. It's crazy.
For those of you who have not looked at the book or do not know exactly what the book is about, when you open it up to the first page and you start reading, the first thing you're going to find out is that Montgomery County has 200 years of spiritualism history. We trained mediums here. We were open and accepting. We asked them to come here. We were all in on it. That is not the case throughout the rest of history. It petered off and people were like, oh no, we don't want this witchcraft stuff around here. But in the beginning, Montgomery County was a hub for it. We had lots of famous people who came here. They stayed at the Elston house. The Elston girls were very into ghosts themselves and would often take ghost picnics to go to places that were haunted to see if they could see ghosts. They loved it.
Especially the Hibernian Mill, if you've never heard of it. It's a place outside of Crawfordsville. There was a mill where a gentleman died, and he supposedly liked to stay around, and the girls would go and watch his antics. And they would talk about it in the newspaper. The girls are going back down to the Hibernian Mill today.
It was a big newspaper article. I mean, a big thing. People would constantly contact the newspaper. My dead husband visited me last night. My dead wife visited me last night. It was all over. I mean, people talked about it, accepted it. It was something that was going on.
And they weren't scared of it. Like John Coffey, after his death, walked around town for a long time, people said, and it didn't really scare anyone.
So is this mainly in like the 1850s?
I've got stories from before the city of Crawfordsville was here. All from almost the moment the county was founded, all the way to less than 10 years ago.
But the majority of the stories, are they before 1900?
I would say before 1930.
Before 1930. About 1890 to 1920-ish.
We have a. I would almost say it's kind of like a. It's kind of weird because from the moment that the county was founded, you have probably a 10 or 15 year span there where you have a lot of stories, and then around it kind of peters off, and then around 1850 It picks that back up again. You have about 30 to 40 years of quite a bit. And then you got about 10 years of almost nothing. And then from 1890 to 1910, it is just insane the amount of stories you have. Then it kind of goes away a little bit, and then it comes back, and it just seems to go in that pattern throughout the history of the town and the county.
Any other questions or anything you're curious about?
So, my father mentioned the pork barn that's down across from jail, where it's Trinity Mission now, that they were wanting not to play down there because of, it was haunted.
You hear that a lot. When people would talk about it and things like that, that area was off limits. You shouldn't go down in that area. You hear about that quite often in the history, and to the point where they even do talk about it. I wouldn't say that I have an article saying that someone saw something, but you do have a lot of articles about stay away from certain areas in Crawfordsville or Montgomery County, and that is one of the areas that they did talk about staying away from.
Well, it feels haunted anyway.
Yeah.
And just the other day, a guy mentioned he had to do some work out there, and
Yeah.
he's a grown man, he was like, no.
Well, a lot of people talked about like when they would go to what they called the outskirts of the city, because there was a lot of forest back then. They would be almost like followed by things. And the Indians were here for a long time, and we had lots of battles with them, even after the county was founded, with them throughout the area. But people would say it wasn't them; it was other things, and they would feel like they were I don't want to say haunted so much as just watched by different things. I actually have an article. I didn't include it in the book because it's just a very small article, and I don't have anything else to go with it. But where a gentleman saw a giant skunk that was like 5 feet tall, and he perfectly describes it as a skunk.
It was five gentlemen.
Yes,
5 different men.
But it was huge. They were out fox hunting, and it scared them. And so there's a lot of like little stories like that in the county of different types of creatures or types of hauntings and things like that people have seen throughout the ages of the town. Waytown, the area between here and Waytown is very famous for what they call Deer Man, where they would see someone walking around who had deer antlers for a head on his head, and he was about 7-8 feet tall. And he supposedly spooked a lot of people throughout that area. And I actually have a story about that in 2009. This one saw it again. I have a story that's going all the way back to Waytown, and actually Deli got me a story from way back. I can't even remember what the date was that it was seen. It's on my computer right now. Yeah, so there's a lot of that you see in the papers where people were nervous when they walked outside of town, and even to this day, those areas are still kind of. You'll notice people don't go to them, or when they do go to them, they do have weird feelings about them.
From here, no, not to go here.
Yeah. Well, and growing up, I think a majority of us who are from here, up to our generation, and we're in our 40s, we're afraid of Spooky Hollow. However, it's not spooky anymore.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
It's not that scary. You have a question?
Do you happen to know when were Ouija boards introduced and popular?
I'm not really familiar with those. Those aren't something I really delved into as of yet.
That was sort of a spiritual kind of craze, I believe. I'm guessing it might have been late 1800s.
I would think it would have had to come after spirit knocking. And spirit knocking came in the 1860s. And that was kind of the way they did their spiritual mediumship for a long time until it was disproven. And so I would figure that it would probably come after that. So you're probably right. It's probably late 1800s kind of thing. Because during this time period, you'll hear a lot of the newspapers will talk about knocking or rocking. And so when they say that, they won't actually say spirit knocking. They'll just say knocking.
And spirit knocking is where you would go to speak to a medium, you would ask questions, and then you would hear knocks to answer, like 1 for yes, 2 for no. And that was really popular here. That was one thing that the Elstons hosted a lot, was spirit knocking. They're also called cabinet knockers because that's how they did it. Someone would hide in a cabinet and then go knocking.
Yeah. There was a famous twins His sister, she would do it with her toes.
With their toes, they were able to use the knuckles of their toes to tap on the ground, and they for years.
Yeah, they were huge into it until one of them got married and decided to out the other one.
Had a conscience and told on themselves.
Yeah,
So.
because they were one of those ones that people couldn't figure out how they were doing it.
And they made a lot of money off of doing it.
There's a spiritualism camp on the White River, and it still exists today, where you can still go there and have these type of events happen.
And there was a train of people who moved through going to that, and we have articles where they stopped in Crawfordsville with their movement as they went through going to the spiritualism camp.
You mentioned Montgomery County was sort of a hub of interest in these things. Are you aware of other localities which also were sort of hubs?
Well, there was a lot in this whole area, but we were just kind of dipping our toes into those other ones. We know so much about Montgomery County because we live here and we love this book.
What would be the focus of your next book on Montgomery County?
I have so many more stories of different things that have happened. In newspaper articles like the Demon in Waytown, and things like that.
Witches.
The Water Witches of Linden.
Ladoga had a ghost that would show up every night and walk down the street with a cane and just scare the bejesus out of everybody in town.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much to go to. It was actually hard to pick what stories to put in this book out of everything, because there's so many of them. Obviously, the Carlsbad Monster was going to go in because it's my favorite thing in the world. I'm obsessed with it. And then the giant graveyard, because I love because I worked at Wabash. That was a cool thing that the Wabash students were over there excavating it. So that was really cool to me.
And that is in the book. There was a graveyard of giant skeletons found in Montgomery County.
It's actually it's out by the old country club. The
in that
location.
little quarry area.
The bluff is still there and everything. It's literally just 2 seconds from the old country club to the location on the bluff where they dug these out of the ground.
Do they still have the skeletons?
Oh no, they fed them to the dogs.
And it says it in the newspapers that they gave the bones to the dogs. They didn't do like a legitimate archaeological dig, and people took home souvenirs, so they were just taking them.
They did have them up in the local shoe store for a while, and then they were taken down and sent to the Smithsonian, and then we didn't see them after that.
Can you tell them how to, if they want to purchase the book, how they can purchase it and what the cost is?
So it is $22 over at the Carnegie Museum if you'd like to purchase it there. It's on all major book selling sites, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles. You can
Is that Barnes & Noble store?
In Lafayette, you can purchase it directly from the publisher, or you can meet us in the parking lot and we can sell you a copy for $20.
Ghosts and Legends of Crawfordsville, Indiana.
I have a copy back here we can pass around.
I was saying, I know it's getting close to 8 o'clock. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has.
What it looks like.
I was just going to, can you share your favorite story, or?
So, Madam Crow is my favorite character out of the whole book, but I will tell you, this is how wild she is. They wrote articles about her in the newspaper, and the claims that she could find lost jewelry and things like that. There's all kinds of articles where she found this, she did this. There's articles of she's a fraud, she couldn't do this. She tracked down horse thieves that the police couldn't find. She knew where they were. But they also claimed that she consorted with black cats, that she kept skeletons in her home, that she drank blood, that she could spit fire. She was very into this persona that she had, and she bought, she had a business out of Ladoga that she had in the back of a mortuary, and she used a coffin as her desk. So she was a character, but she was also, as much as they loved to hate her, they loved to love her, they loved to hate her, she herself as a woman in that time owned 5 different properties in Crawfordsville. She was very wealthy, very well-to-do, but she lived her home in the Nibble.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Nibble. It's over by
It's
the
over
park.
by Big Dipper.
That
by the
area
park.
where her house was, I grew up in the Nibble. People still don't like to go over to that area. Like we were told as kids to stay away from it, because you never knew what would happen if you went over there. Because there's a little playground there, on Tuttle Street at the end of the road, is a dead end road. Her house was right beside it, where that playground is now, and we weren't allowed to go to the playground because that area we were always told was haunted.
Yeah, and we call it the Nibble, but the actual name was the Goose Nibble. So that is, if you see that, it's that same area. So that is my favorite story.
Mine obviously is the Crawfordsville Monster, even though I didn't write that article, she wrote that. It's still my favorite.
And I won't tell you, I won't say it out loud, he hates when I do this, but after this is over, if you want to come and see me, I have a really good theory about what the Crawfordsville Monster was, and he hates it. He hates it with a passion. But I've got a really good theory about it. I've also got a really good story that we're working on for our next book. I can't share it now here because we're recording, but if you want a sneak peek into something really fun, I've got another good story.
Did you have a question?
I've read your book.
Oh, nice.
My daughter went ahead and bought it for me, and I really enjoyed it.
Good.
The stories, some of the stories of what you have told in the book, my grandpa told me as a kid. Well, both grandpas. And, you know, it brought back memories for me that I enjoyed.
Now, we really tried to work on that with this book because we didn't know if we'd do another one. And I really wanted to make sure that those stories that we all heard as kids from our relatives were in this book where they would really stand out to you. So I felt like that was the big heart of Crawfordsville, was all the stories we tell each other, and especially our children. So having those stories there where people could read them really helps. I mean, I hear that all the time where, I remember that story. I remember that place. That's so good a feeling to be able to have.
Well, and that's kind of the basis of where we had all of this from, is that we wholeheartedly believe that a society is built on its legends, its lore, its stories. When in the past, people would hear these tales about, the Jack and the Beanstalk, that was a cautionary tale. All of these tales, all of these legends that we heard, the Spooky Hollow legends, they were cautionary tales, so that we didn't go out and get into trouble or go someplace maybe we shouldn't have been. We know now, after doing some research, that the area of Spooky Hollow was kind of a dangerous area. Unfortunately, we had a high population of KKK members. That's where they were stationed. People told these stories. You don't want to go down to Spooky Hollow. You don't want to go down there because that's where they're at. But we didn't want to say that, so instead, there's ghosts. There's ghosts down there, don't go.
We do have some interesting stories that I was able to actually find documented proof of Spooky Hollow. So it wasn't just an urban legend. I've actually got some pretty cool documented things about the area.
We have a Native American witch doctor who lived down in that area. And we have some stories. We actually have a small snippet of that in the book. I mentioned Fisher Doherty earlier. Most of the town loved him. They wanted him to run for governor. The Native American witch doctor thought he was the devil. So, fought against him.
We'll be here afterwards if you guys have any other questions. We'll have to stop and talk to us.
Hey, we're gonna have to cut you off, but we'll have to have them back for the next book, won't we?
Yes. Yes.